First up, we have Auto Defense Matrix. 1 mana paladin spell, secret, when one of your minions is attacked, give it Divine Shield. A secret's power is typically decided by how easy it is to activate, and how hard it is to counter. Ice Barrier is only 8 armor for a 3 mana card, but since it's almost guaranteed to activate, certain decks adore it. Eye for an Eye, meanwhile, is super easy to counter even though it's just as easy to activate. With that in mind, this card is fairly likely to activate at some point, as minion trades are pretty common. Even if the opponent is using a face deck, taunt minions still exist and can force this card to activate. All this in mind, this card equates to, when a minion attacks, prevent the attack and deal damage to that minion. That's honestly kinda similar to Frostbolt, albeit a Frostbolt that the opponent aims and that can be made stronger with the right minions on the field. All for 1 mana? That seems pretty strong. This card certainly has weaknesses though. A player can attack with a minion that they don't care about and thus divert this Frostbolt-like effect. All that said, this card is still amazing, provided you're clever enough about when you use it and what minions are on the field when you do. Next we have Astro Mansur. 7 mana 5/5 mage minion, Battlecry, summon a random minion with cost equal to your hand size. This card specializes in tempo, building a board with a decent amount of threats. In a deck that wisely keeps a large hand, this can be quite powerful. But there's a caveat with that general strategy. To have a large hand, a player needs to either invest resources to draw cards, or to not use resources in the early game. Usually both if they're a control deck. Such decks don't usually have a use for a large amount of tempo. Not at 7 mana anyways. The token exception is decks like Handlock and Evenlock, which only manage that because of Warlock's hero power. Now, if there was a deck that could use large tempo and a large hand, that would be a different story. Oh hello, Elemental Mage with Mountain Giants, fancy seeing you here! Even in a deck tailored specifically to this card, this can be a little challenging to pull off, so I'm going to go with stupid unless it isn't. But judging from that specific mage archetype we have been seeing, this card very well might find a home there. Next we have Giggling Inventor, 5 mana 2/1 minion, Battlecry, summon 2 1/2 mechs with Taunt and Divine Shield. This card actually has a decent amount going for it. Against decks with large minions, this card is practically like a Frost Nova or a Blizzard, stopping the assault of those cards. Against faster decks, this story is more interesting, since the mechs can stop minions from coming in before the 2/1 body can, hopefully, make a decent trade. So this card is actually a decent defensive tool in most matchups. The problem is its cost. A defensive tool at more than 5 mana had better be super worth it, and this card toes that line with possibly being too slow to stop the onslaught. As such, while I'm tempted to give this card a pretty good, I can't say for certain if it will be too slow to save the day. Even if it does, it seems more inclined to delay the inevitable rather than turn the game around. As such, I'm more inclined to call this card fun and balanced. Maybe a deck fond of smaller mechs can find a use for a card this defensive. Up next we have Cloning Device. 2 mana priest spell, discover a copy of a minion in your opponent's deck. This feels very similar to Draconid Operative, though it notably only takes minions. But Draconid Operative was a decent minion by itself, while this is nothing. Not making for a good case here. While this card might be fun to get an unusual cross-class combo, like Antonidas Power Word Shield, the odds of that are pretty low. It's more likely that the discover options will be subpar, at least in certain constructed matchups. In Arena, meanwhile, this might have been a decent card once upon a time, but the new bucket system increases the odds of subpar cards being in decks. As a 2 mana discover, you want to make sure these cards are high quality, like Shadow Visions does. Your opponent decides the quality here, so this card's consistency is subpar. While I nearly called this lacking, there is a small detail that this card may be powerful against very specific decks. So by a technicality, this card is okay in certain cases. But this card has barely any synergies it can use, so I don't anticipate this card being seen much in Constructed or even Arena. Next we have Zarek's Cloning Gallery. 9 mana priest legendary spell, summon a 1/1 copy of each minion in your deck. Well, that's certainly interesting. Without a deck built specifically for this card, we're looking at something objectively worse than Onyxia. So we're looking at giving this a complex rating, dependent on how strong we can make it. With that in mind, what's best as a 1/1? That's right, Death Rattle minions, and Priest seems very well equipped for that. With the right cards, we can create a conglomeration of catastrophic clones that, if destroyed, can prove devastating. That's cool, but it has weaknesses. First off, the 9 mana means this takes your whole turn, and a whole turn dedicated to 7 small minions is pretty poor, even if they have strong death rattles or other effects. it's just too clunky to be super applicable. At the same time, this card becomes useless if the death rattle minions are drawn, and thus becomes weaker as the game goes on. This card is best before all those minions are drawn, which thanks to its high cost sometimes just isn't applicable. So of the ratings, I have to go with stupid unless not. This doesn't mean it's unplayable, just that it's going to take a lot of effort, planning, and luck to get it to work well. Moving on, we have Blight Nozzle Crawler, 4 mana 2/4 rogue mech, death rattle, summon a 1/1 ooze with poisonous and rush. The idea of this card is to defend the deadly ooze so that it's more likely to kill a minion. That being said, the death rattle effect means the opponent can potentially activate this at an inopportune time, if they so choose. That kinda just makes this card a clunkier spider bomb, albeit with more sticking power. While the poisonous rush can be strong, the requirements for getting it are a bit hard to navigate, so sadly lacking. Hey Blizzard, maybe if you want a death rattle rogue, you should consider making death rattles that are actually applicable. Next we have Starliner, 7 mana 7/7 minion, Battlecry, if you control 3 minions with 7 health, deals 7 damage to all enemies. Weird. That Battlecry is a simple if-then clause, with a condition that's ridiculous, but a result that's ridiculous. I think that this card counts as one of the 3 minions, so it only needs 2 others to work? I don't know. But without its Battlecry, this card is just a war golem, not great. In the end, this rating should be obvious. Stupid unless not, because it's definitely stupid unless, well, it isn't. If you want, go build a deck with Thaurissan, Flamery Faceless, Grumble, and Starliners. Let me know if you can make it work. Up next, we have Cybertech Chip. 2 mana hunter spell, give your minions death rattle, add a random mech to your hand. Look at that art! Amalgam Hunter is confirmed! Believe me! Believe me! This card is comparable to Infest, only instead of giving beasts that Hunter synergizes with, it gives mechs. That's not bad actually, considering that Mech Hunter isn't particularly infeasible right now. Even if it isn't, this card still provides multiple random cards, which are likely to synergize together, but that's only if you can build a board of minions and get those minions killed. In the end, this card can be decent so long as you have a good use for the mechs. To that end, Amalgam Hunter. Make it work, Hearthstone community. I believe in you. Up next, we have Omega Assembly. 1 mana warrior spell, discover a mech. If you have 10 mana crystals, keep all 3 cards. Whoa. Now that's an Omega card. A 1 mana discover is usually alright only if the discovered card synergizes with the deck, and even then it's a little weak. Basically, 1 mana is spent to maybe get a card that's circumstantially powerful. For a mech warrior, that's not bad by any standard, probably worth a fun for the arena. With the 10 mana condition though, it's much, much better. Off of a top deck, this card leaves you with 9 mana and 3 mechs to use. That's insane! So this card gets up pretty good. If you have a mid-range or control mech warrior, this card fits in there perfectly. Correction, if you have a mech warrior that's not terrible, this card fits in there perfectly. Next up, we have Eternia Rover. 1 mana 1/3 warrior mech, whenever this minion takes damage, gain 2 armor. Craft that shit golden. Perhaps I'm overrating this card slightly, but I want to drive home how powerful this card is. Put aside the mech tag and the class it's in for a minute, and this card is a dire mole with armor gain. While it trades poorly compared to Plated Beetle, its stats are perfect for turn 1, countering Archer's Veterans and Silverhand Recruits nicely. So that's pretty good. Now let's step back and acknowledge what this card is, a mech in a deck with self-damaging tech. Some people think upgradable Framebot is good, but there's a world of difference between 1 mana and 2 mana. This card does the Framebot's job almost as well, since 3 health is plenty sturdy for magnetic mechs, and it does it for half the mana cost. Then those bigger mechs get even more armor, which in turn works with other warrior synergies, and suddenly we're looking pretty healthy with a pretty big minion. So yeah, technically by the rules of my rating system, I probably should have given this a pretty good. But cut me some slack, this is the perfect warrior card! Even non-mech decks should entertain using this card for their purposes. Thus, it gets the highest rating. And finally, this is my Boom Ship! 9 mana warrior legendary spell, summon 3 random minions from your hand, give them rush. Side note, I'm getting a lot of Avengers vibes with this card art. We already mentioned with the cloning gallery that 9 mana spells are a bit hard to use, taking up the whole turn just to play some minions. However, this has a significant leg up on this other 9 mana spell, and even on most 9 mana minions. First off, it's plenty applicable for a control deck, particularly a recruit deck, to have a handful of high-cost minions, especially ones without Battlecry. Playing those cards quickly isn't a limit on flexibility, because a deck like that would prefer to cast lower-cost spells regardless. This card simply enables their play. Secondly, the rush effect allows these cards to be used even if the player is losing. Other 9-cost cards without defensive value cannot be played when the opponent has an edge. No such weakness here. The rush enables the minions to instead be used in defense, potentially swinging the game. So a strong card overall, but it's not that straightforward. Without the right cards in hand, this isn't really usable, which is both true in the early game and in the late game. So this card is decent, very strong when used correctly, but that requires a lot of careful planning. By the way, stick this card in every odd warrior ever. It'll make Baku significantly less terrible to draw.